Okay, thank you very much for coming. Just sitting took us 10 minutes. Thank you for coming. I'm Swidimang and I chair the IRTC. On my left is Judge Yakub, Zaki Yakub, retired. We're supposed to be having Dr. Yvette Abrams. She's tied up somewhere, so this is her seat. And the other two commissioners are tied up outside of Cape Town. So welcome. We have seen a document here. That's not the one?
No.
That's a different one. Okay. Do we have the document from, so what are you?
Yes.
Yeah, so what are you?
Black Academic Caucus.
Oh, okay. Candice, have you seen this? Have I seen this?
I haven't looked at it. Just pass me, slip me this folder.
Yeah.
This one.
I've only seen the one by Dr. Chinyoka.
Okay. All right, but the issues are...
It's not this one.
yeah.
That's a different. That's the one that will become different with me and how.
Oh,
this
okay.
today BAC.
Okay, so your submission is entirely different.
Correct.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, but nevertheless, let's go. We have got about 45 minutes.
Okay.
We have eaten 10 minutes into that, just with this logistics. Maybe we can stretch it by another 10 minutes or so in order to compensate for that. Yeah. So if you can speak for something like not more than 30 minutes,
Okay.
so that we can then interact
Okay.
with your presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is George Sode. And at the time that submission was made, I was the secretary of the BAC, and I submitted this document. First of all, I would like to thank the Commission for allowing us to present our submission. It's very much appreciated. And maybe I'll just take 2 minutes to say something about the BAC, the Black Academic Caucus at UCT. Our purpose at UCT is to promote transformation and a space for Black academics to have the same opportunities and treatment as all other academics at UCT. So although we have the word Black in, it's not because we want preferential treatment for Black academics. Quite the opposite, we want us to have the same opportunities as all other academics at UCT. I'll now go through
Is the Black narrowly defined or broadly?
It's broadly defined.
Okay.
Yeah. So as you can see, our membership comes from a broad range of academics at UCT.
And are there whites who are members of the forum at all?
No,
Okay.
not at the present time.
But if somebody applied and said, we sympathize with you and so on, and we want to do this work with you, would you admit a member?
Well, according to Constitution, we make no, we do not make an exclusion. We don't have any exclusions.
Okay, right.
We just say that whoever wants to join and is aligned with our objectives,
Yeah.
they can join.
Right.
But we do not exclude anybody.
Okay.
The only principle there that must be aligned.
But in fact, you have no black members at the moment.
Sorry, we don't have any?
Any white members?
We don't have any white members
Okay.
at the moment. But we do have friends of BAC, yes, correct.
And postgrads.
And postgrads, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, so I'm just going to go over an overview of our submission and to look at the issues that we have raised in the submission. So the first issue that we have raised is the mental illness among students and staff. Over the last few years, we have noticed an increase in the number of mental health problems among students and staff. And we contend that part of this has to do with the institutional culture and the situations that staff and students, the untransformative situations that staff and students have to contend with. We'll go into more detail then. The next issue we touched on was the accommodation problems. And this was one of the reasons for the protests in 2016. Then the third item that we have raised is the staffing profile at UCT. So it still remains mainly white, and one of the main issues that we have raised is the dearth of Black, African, South African academics at UCT, who still represent a very marginal group in the institution. The fourth issue we have raised is the institutional structure. This has to do with heads of department and deputy deans and appointment of these structures. And the fifth is the racist behaviors that we have some Black academics experience at UCT. Right, so I'll just go back to the first one, the mental health problems that we have noticed. And so as I said, we have noticed an increase in the number of staff and students who have been experiencing this, and they have come to us and they have told us about their experiences and the stresses in their lives while working at UCT, and they have ascribed this to the institutional racism or the discriminatory practices that are within the institution. So one case that we have, or one thing that, and happens quite often, is that when Black academics take their cases to, when they experience racism or discrimination, when they take it to their line management structures, they are then told that, well, either they're imagining it or it's not as serious as they believe it is, and it is then brushed off. And over time, this then accumulates in depression or other kinds of health problems. And we have an example of this that we have included. Regarding accommodation, I think this has been raised already in other forums, so I'll just skip for this and move on to the academic and staffing profile. As I mentioned, the number of Black South African academics at the university now stands at something like 15%. And in our opinion, this is too low, and the growth of this number has been too slow.
What percentage?
Around 15%. So that of an academic body of something like, by my estimation, about 1,300 academics, there are about less than 150 Black, African, South African academics. And when we consider that if you spread them across, or consider that there are about over 150 departments and units at the university, when you spread it across all of these departments, you start to see that there are departments or units that don't have a single Black, African, South African.
How many percent white?
Now that's okay. I have to nuance that. So that would be around 55 to 60% of white South African academics.
So we're talking about, other than, well, just Indian people, so-called colors, that others make up 25%.
Yes, and foreign nationals.
And foreign.
Yes.
But now, a foreign national from Nigeria, for example, would not count in the 10%, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. They would not count within that.
Not in that 15.
And we have to consider also that the breakdown is different depending on the rank within the academic group. So for professoriates, there's a higher number of white academics. When you come down to the lectures, the numbers might be a bit higher, but marginally higher. So if we were to now to take the white foreign nationals, then the number jumps up to maybe around 70% or more.
And in terms of female, male?
There are a lot more male, lot more male than female, significantly.
You don't have more some.
I can give you the 2000. So this is from the numbers from the university strategic plans from 2020 to 2015. So sorry, just get the right sheet. Okay, so in terms of female academics, 59.
59%.
Sorry, 59. Actually, that's the number.
Oh.
59. For males, 69. And that's right across all the academic designations. And in terms of percentages, this is again for the 2015-2020 strategic plan. That was 5% and 4%. We don't expect that those numbers have increased significantly. Now, the reason this is a problem for us is because when we talk about alienation, this is one of the sources of that alienation for students. Because when they come here, they don't see themselves reflected in the institution. They lack role models. And this leads to that sense of alienation. And there are departments that don't have or have never had a black South African working there beyond the level of a cleaner. So now you have a student who comes to a department and the only person that they can relate to in terms of their designation or group is the cleaner. And over time, these kind of issues just build up. And we're not saying that it's all the reasons, but this is, we believe, one of the reasons. And yes. So the next thing, there's a lot more that we can say in respect to this. And the figures are captured in the strategic plan, the 5 strategic plans of the university. If we had more time, we could go in deeper into them. Okay. But I'll just stop there for now. The next one is the institutional practices relating to employment equity and the way that heads of department and people are chosen. One of the problems that we have noted is that although the university has policies to effect transformation,
just press them open. There are some others trying to come. Oh.
Although the university has policies to effect transformation, what we have noted is that these policies break down when they get down to the departmental level. And we believe part of it is the employment equity and heads of department. So for example, right now, one of the problems that we see is that the way EE, employment equity, is facilitated in meetings. It's a very devolved process. So what you have is employment equity reps who sit on selection committees, and they're selected, they're trained and selected and from within faculties, and they sit on the selection committees. But there isn't because it's a devolved process, there's never an overview. So one person who sits on one selection committee won't necessarily sit on other selection committees. And because of this, there isn't a situation where there's one person who sees what's happening right across the board. And because of that, they don't get to see the ways in which employment equity is not promoted. For example, you might get into one meeting and then people will say, well, you know, this is a special case. In this particular situation, we can't find somebody. We're going to have to, in this particular case, we may not have to follow the employment equity, or it may not be necessary. But you find that this practice then repeats itself in every other selection committee. But because it's always one person who sees one snapshot of a small picture.
What do you mean, one person?
So, for example, you might have...
Is the selection committee consisting of one person or what?
No, one employment equity representative. So there'll be a selection committee in which, so the faculty chooses one person to sit on that selection committee to serve as the employment equity rep. Okay. Their job is to make sure that the employment equity processes are respected. But if during the committee, the selection committee, somebody says, well, in this particular case, we feel that we have met the necessary criteria, or we can't find the person, or for whatever reason, then the employment equity might not be fully realized. But because it's only one person just sees what happens in one committee, you never get the appreciation what happens across the whole faculty or across the whole university.
How do you compare with the other historically white universities in terms of employment equity and representativity?
Unfortunately for that, we haven't studied that, so I can't give an answer to that. Okay. Yeah. But if I may ask my colleagues if they know anything.
Well, I think what we can say is that the annual reports that are submitted to the Department of Higher Education and Training would be a good source to get that information and make comparison. UCT has just submitted its own, but the other universities would have done the same.
So that, and then there's also the structure of bodies that make decisions at the university, for example, Senate, which we believe needs to be restructured. And partly because they tend not to be representative or representative of the broad spectrum of the university. If I can ask, maybe one of my colleagues wants to add something to that.
I think also council, what many people don't realize is that the University of Cape Town's council composition is an anomaly in the system, in that alumni have more representation than you would see in other universities. And if you look at the university's history, that would speak to a particular constituency because they bring funding. A lot more of the decisions than that council make. You can expect that there might be conflict of interest issues there that we need to explore.
Who appoints the council?
Council is...
I thought it was the minister.
The minister only has appointees, and in all other universities, the minister has 5 appointees.
Out of?
Out of 30. But in the...
and who appoints the rest?
So different constituencies given the prerogative to appoint. But the University of Cape Town only has 3 ministerial appointees, and they've resisted to raise that number to 5 like other universities.
And then that is in the statutes of the university.
That means the minister just hasn't appointed his or her 5 people?
No, has been told you can't raise the number of representatives in council.
You mean the minister has been told by who? Because if it's the minister's power and right to appoint 5, how can anyone say to the minister you can't appoint?
We don't know.
But
That is what I'm telling you is what is currently the case.
no.
What the
But wait,
reasons
what I don't understand, the part I don't understand is, then there's something wrong with the minister, isn't there? If he can be told.
I don't want to get into
No. I really am trying to understand, is the minister just being irresponsible or lazy or what?
There's a conversation to be had with the minister, because maybe they're lobbies.
I think the idea might have to, we might have to look at the statute of the
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think universities usually say they are autonomous and they can't be told what to do.
No, but if the statute provides for 5, Chair,
It
then the
does.
minister
It
has
does.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does.
No, probably each university.
Up to 5.
Isn't it that each university has got its own statutes? Yeah.
Yes,
So they might be
they
different.
might be, they are different,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Right. Then the final but not the least, there are many other issues we could have brought here, is racist behavior on campus. Again, here we have had people who have contacted us across the university, who have told us about racist experiences that they have had, which have not been dealt with. Now, further to this, there is also the matter of the way in which the rules of the university are sometimes used to cover racist behavior. So you find situations in which the regulations are applied in a way that predominantly affects black students. And those staff who do that then hide behind the regulations.
Is that an example?
An example. Now, before I say this, I have to mention that when I say racist here, I'm saying racist in the sense that it's discriminatory, but you can't actually say that somebody did something racist. The outcome is racist without having done something that one could actually say is racist. So, for example, you have a situation in which students are sent to disciplinary, but when you look at the composition of the students that are sent to disciplinary, you find that they're predominantly black students. And I can actually say this, I have a case of this that I'm dealing with right now.
So you think that white students are just not taken to disciplinary, whatever they do? Are they being favored?
Not that. This is why I say it's very difficult to pinpoint the racism here, because you would actually, I would have to actually say there isn't that white student did this, and you can't actually. You're trying to look for evidence where that evidence may not be readily available. But I think one of our other members wants to point out something here.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a staff member who actually experienced the racist behavior.
Yes, we'll actually have one there as well. Yeah. If you want to speak to it.
Yeah, and then we can start. And then
Yeah.
You?
Sorry, let me just make a point in terms of time. Actually, as I understand, Brian is also here. So Brian's here, Terry is here, and George. So effectively that would mean that they could go up until 13:15. Because those are all three
Okay.
persons that are here.
So what do you
So the
want?
next slot is for 13:15 for
Oh.
somebody who's not in this room.
Oh,
Everyone else is here until 13:15 and they have related issues to raise.
Yes. Okay, in case you were concerned about the time.
I don't think I understand what you're saying.
So from
You
the
know,
schedule that's set
Yes, yes.
up,
Brian?
George is currently addressing you.
Yes.
Brian is also in the room, and so is
Oh.
Terry.
Oh.
So as long as they're cognizant of each other,
Yes.
then they can go up to 13:15.
Yeah. Is that agreed? Does it work for you?
Can we make it one session instead of separate sessions for different people?
Jump out.
I have lost contact with Nodowa here. Thanks for bringing him along.
Because I was going to just point out that the submission that I made with how is quite broad, so it won't fit into.
It won't fit.
It won't fit.
So we should follow the.
So this is I don't know if Brian is agreeable because in fact,
Yeah,
as a
let's-
BAC submission.
Yeah.
I don't know which.
Yeah, let's just follow this.
Okay.
As he
Alright.
said.
Okay.
So we will end at
11:30.
No, at 22.
22.
So we said we'll give
Okay.
10 more minutes.
Yeah.
So my name is Siwe Toto. I'm a lecturer in public health. I started working at the University of Cape Town in 2015 as the Health and Community Development Coordinator for the Schools Improvement Initiative, which is in the Schools Development Unit within the Faculty of Humanities. The SDU is a research unit which has Dr. John Clark as the director, who also is the director of the Schools Improvement Initiative, SII. SII is one of the 5 strategic initiatives of the previous Vice Chancellor. So I worked for a year, a period of 12 months, between the 5th of January to the 8th of December, including weekends and public holidays of that year because of the sheer amount of work. In one particular afternoon, I was in my office, I was leaving my office to go to the bathroom, and on my way, I passed by the director of the school, who is my line manager's line manager. So he's 2 levels above me. And he walked past me and shouted, "Gaffer." And there was no one in the office at the time except for my own line manager.
What's his name?
Jonathan Clark. So he shouted "Gaffer," and I was taken aback. And when I looked around, I realized that there's no one else in the office because it was it must have been around 4:20. So people had left the office already. And I continued past. I went to the bathroom and back. Then the following day, I was called in by my line manager, Dr. Patty Silbert, who then assured me and said that actually, so I just want to warn you, Siwe, that sometimes John has difficult times, and so he grunts when he's having a difficult time, so don't take it personally. He was just grunting. So that was the first instance. And then a couple of weeks later, I was called in for a verbal warning. I had chaired a meeting in one of the committees that we're in the work that we do. So it's important to say I'm an occupational therapist. The way I chair meetings is slightly different. I facilitate. So I was facilitating a discussion as the chair of that meeting, and both of them were present. So I was called in for a verbal warning in how I had conducted that meeting. I was told I'm too friendly and too amiable, and that I should try to be more official. Then hardly a week passed, I was also called for another warning to be told that I do not dress appropriately, that my clothing is too casual and I should wear suits given that I meet Western Cape government officials from the Department of Education. Now, I'm an occupational therapist who was also working clinically at the time, seeing children between grades R and 3, and also assisting 4th-year occupational therapy students, speech therapy students, and audiology students in their practicals. So it was quite impractical to want me to put on a suit and a tie when I'm also going to be working clinically in such a a context. So I obviously had to conclude that perhaps that those two warnings, which came right after that racist slur, were to, I don't know, to prevent me from reporting that. What made it particularly difficult was that it was not my direct line manager who said that, it was my line manager's manager. So, and I was under a contract for 12 months at the time, where it was based on my performance, renewal was based on my performance. And then lastly, this was in September, I got called again into the office, and I was offered my job again for a period of 2016. But from 40 hours, they decreased it to 20 hours, citing that I have a master's to complete, so it might be beneficial for me. They also cut the salary in half, and they said, what do you think? And then I said, I'd like to think about it. And I went into my own office. As I got into my office, I received a Facebook message from a previous, someone whom I attended undergraduate with, who had been offered the exact job that I was given and had accepted it. So I don't know why I was being fooled into thinking that I have a job that was already given to someone else. That's my submission.
What happened to that job eventually?
It was given to the person who asked me for advice.
Did you refuse?
I refused later on, because then I thought it's useless if someone's already been offered the job. But I must also say I was going to refuse it because the kind of work I was doing, I was working at least 100 hours a week, and yet now they were cutting it from 40 hours contractually to 20 hours. So since I left, the job has been divided into two roles.
And it's coming, eh? It's coming in your slot.
It's that I have to provide the lecture, so I have to.
So
Within our.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I did
but
provide
in your slot, yeah, you have got a slot here.
No, that's not Brian.
No,
Oh,
I'm
this is not-
Siwe.
No, this is Siwe. Oh, Brian is.
He was sitting right here.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
work
Okay.
14 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's what makes it 100 hours.
Yes, I worked between 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. every night, every day.
And you only slept for 4 hours.
Yes, including driving.
Well, it would have been impossible for me to do my work at all in those circumstances.
I was still given deadlines to meet, which were impossible. So I had to provide weekly reports, monthly reports, and all sorts of reports within a very short time frame, which I was able to do. Some I had to negotiate deadlines, but that was the reality. So, which is why I worked including public holidays and Saturdays and Sundays.
What do you do now?
I now lecture in public health at the Faculty of Health Sciences.
You've got a full-time job now.
That's correct.
We have had quite a bit about mental health at this institution.
Yeah.
And of course, including the recent tragic incident, what we've heard from students themselves. Are you satisfied with the level of support, that is the professional support for both staff and students who experience health problems, mental health problems?
So a lot of the support that students get is outside, the support that students get that's meaningful is often given outside of the official structure of the university. Just to give an example, since Prof. Mayosi's passing, there are academic staff members who've been on suicide watch because of what was uttered and what got to the media, but what students heard themselves being said about how they may have to blame for Professor Mayosi's passing. They took it very hard. And one student did try to take her life. But because of these staff members who make themselves available beyond the call of duty, she was found in time. She's currently in hospital, being looked after. And even accessing that hospital took staff members who made themselves available to make that link. And she was one of the 2 staff members who luckily were able to be contacted in time. I've been a warden in the university structure. I was a warden at Karina's residence, and during the time that I was there, there were a number of attempts by students to take their lives. And in one instance, when I lettered student wellness, that there was a student I was very worried about, I was basically encouraged to have her leave the residence. She had indicated that she has a friend somewhere, and I was basically told, if it doesn't happen on campus, then it's not your issue. But with the sub-wardens, we made sure that she didn't leave, and she didn't leave, but she tried to take her life, and we again caught her in time and got her the help that she needed. But consistently, I would hear students saying they are not using student wellness because they can see that the person sitting right across doesn't care.
What's your name?
But oftentimes, the staff members themselves are overworked. So it's not necessarily their fault.
What's your name?
My name is Erwani Ramugondo, and I'm a professor at the university.
You had your hand up. Yes.
So I want to comment on this mental health issue because I think what's happened in the university is that the approach to mental illness is one that sees the impairment, right? So it sees the depression, it sees these diagnoses, and it burdens the individual with having to address that impairment as an individual. So what that means is that when a student comes to a lecturer, engages with lecturers and says they have depression, they might be given time, for example, to take time off from their academic work, but the burden stays on that student to actually make up for the academic demands. So there isn't, even in the current mental health policy, there isn't enough thought and attention given to how to really support students so that they can have their mental illness, meet the academic requirements, and still feel as though they're part of the university. The disability policy and the mental health policy is aimed at individual services that addresses symptoms of these, but do not address the way the institution accommodates or creates an inclusive environment, or actually the way the institution creates an environment that actually disables people and causes psychological distress, and so might actually be exacerbating the very impairment that people present with. And on that point around providing services, many of the services that are provided are reactive, and they're only there for the time that the person is acutely ill or symptomatic. And once that passes, students and staff members are left on their own without the support and have to contend with the ongoing distress that the institution inflicts on us.
With this transformation, have you talked about, as a BAC, have you talked about what should happen? What should be done differently?
And I just want to expand on that a little. Sorry.
Yes.
You see, you told us all the troubles. The troubles are very worrying. Realistically, what we would like are recommendations from all of you about what is the way forward. There are certain realities. There are too few black people at the university, which is clear. And because you understand the conditions better, and there's too little time to discuss it now, We can go into it a little bit, but what I would prefer is a considered submission from the Black Academic Caucus, realistic submissions about the way forward. What are the processes that should be put in place to take matters forward? And I think that that's what's lacking. We have a very good idea of what the problems are, but we need to be told what the possible solutions are as well, so that there can be a positive content to the report. It's very easy to say what's wrong. It's a lot harder to say what can be done about it. And that, for me, is a serious problem. And I would like, if the caucus undertook to send us written submissions within a reasonable time in relation to what could be done, we could look at those submissions and we might meet with you again to talk about it.
I think many colleagues want to reply. And I just want, many colleagues I think want to reply to that. And I just want to start with a response on this issue of mental health and disability.
Yes.
Because as much as there are these issues, we are also the academics who sit on committees who are trying to change these issues. And the experience on those committees when you're part of the institution of trying to change it is one where you're also facing resistance when you're trying to implement change. So, for example, we, about a week and a half, had a meeting where we looked at the university disability policy and identified what the issues are with that policy that makes it not inclusive, and identify what the kind of change is and the support that is needed for that change to happen. But what we engage with as we try to make these changes is the resistance. So when we're talking about solutions, it's not for lack of trying to implement solutions.
Okay.
And I think one thing to highlight is that we have not only made ourselves available in terms of indicating what the issues are, but we've also made ourselves available to serve. And in serving the institution, what we've encountered is resistance. What we have called out as a problem in 2015, after the Rose Must Fall campaign started, was that there were two issues that we were picking up as a problem in the institution. One, that there was not a strong signal from the center that transformation is an imperative. It wasn't that, heads of departments were being given the sense that transformation is an option. They can opt in or opt out. It's not an imperative. Secondly, we pointed out that we do not see mechanisms to hold people accountable for not just resisting transformation, but for intentionally working in the opposite direction. So many of us feel actually exhausted.
If I can add there to what Elwani has said, I think as we're approaching the 25th year of the end of apartheid, I think one thing we mustn't lose sight of is that the slow rate of transformation is not accidental. It's when you have, for things to change, the people who benefit from the change have to be involved in that process. And at the moment, when you get to committees, you find that there isn't adequate representation. And because of this, the people who make decisions for the change don't necessarily, and it doesn't mean that they do it intentionally, it might be unconscious, they don't appreciate the benefits that come from that change to themselves. And if there was better representation, the people for whom the benefits mean the most would actually be able to drive the change.
So just to convert that, if you said in your recommendations that this is the state of the representation, now, in our view, it is realistically possible for every committee to have one black representative or 2 or 3 or whatever, and that is what we should work towards. That would be the kind of recommendation one would like to see, which are practical and concrete. And I was hoping, Prof, that when you were saying you were tired now and exhausted, it didn't mean that that's going to be a reason why we are not going to get positive recommendations from you.
Yeah, well, just to give you an indication, right, why some of us are exhausted. For 2 years, 18 months, we worked on a process that the university itself instituted. Brian was on a working group along with others where we worked on what it would mean to decolonize curricula and the academy. So we were part of the curriculum change working group, and recently released, well, we had to put pressure on the outgoing Vice Chancellor to make the framework available to the university community. Now, I can tell you now that the signals that I'm getting is that that work was for nothing.
Has the framework not been released?
It's been released, but it's not enough to just say it's out. You have to, as the leader of the institution or leaders of the institution, indicate to the university community what you see in it and how you think.
And whether it's acceptable or not, and what are they going to do about it. And if they're not doing anything, they must tell you they're not doing anything and why.
It's been silent.
Okay. I mean, you're not demanding that the framework be agreed with completely.
Absolutely.
You're saying that the framework must be taken seriously and they must interact with it and respond to it, not just shelve it.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh yes. You are the last.
Okay. So I just wanted to just add on to what Elelwani has been saying, which is, you know, we've been providing solutions or suggesting solutions for a very long time at a lot of, you know, personal and professional cost. Elelwani herself has been special advisor to the VC. She sat on the special executive task team, as have I. We've sat on numerous committees. We've taken up deputy dean positions. And in all of those spaces, you know, we have provided solutions and tried to make change. And my understanding about today and coming to this IRTC is so that we could actually share what the problems are and what, you know, resistance we've been experiencing in those spaces. And now it feels a bit like we're being told we need to provide solutions, rather than express what our problems are.
How do we dream up the solutions is what I'd like
No, we can give you a long list of proposed solutions. We've been working on them for a very long time. Yeah. But my point is that in that process of working on these solutions, we have experienced a lot of pushback that has come at a, you know, high cost, personally and professionally. And these are the things that we want the IRTC to address.
But you're not objecting to giving us a resolution.
No, we can do that.
All right.
Okay. We are more or less out of time.
Yeah.
By
when will we get?
Yeah. Okay. Now they will give us that.
Yeah.
You know, when around 1970, 1964, 65, etc., when a lot of our freedom fighters were on Robben Island, it looked like the end, as if they are finished. Yeah, there was nothing. There was no political activity in the country. It was quiet. People were cowed, were afraid, and they thought this is the end. But they believed, you know, they were. By the time I got there in 1973, they were thinning out, but people had already done 10 years, and it didn't look like this regime could be collapsed, that it will ever go away. And even those who went into exile, the same thing. But look at where we are now. So it's we need to stick in there and believe that this institution and the rest of the country can change. But it's only when we recognize that there is a fight to fight. It's a fight to be fought, and we fight it in order to advance our society. So let us not despair. Let's work on those solutions that are possible. That's why he says that please present some solutions so that we can put those into recommendations. We think that the university as a whole, the whole community, maybe there are others who don't believe it, but there are a lot of people in the university community believe that something is wrong with this institution and something must be done to correct. So that's a good start. And we would like to present ourselves as an agency that could play a role in making members of this community in their different diversities to find a way of talking and taking the university forward. So if you could make that submission, so that it is, we heard by word of mouth, but we need something in writing that will form part and parcel of our overall report writing of this process. And as you do that, it's not what this commission had talked about, but in another environment, we're discussing the problems that students face at university. And there was someone who said and argued very strongly that part of the problem, talking about suicide, that and mental health of students, that the education system as a whole fails students, fail our students studying at primary school, secondary school, high school, and then university. In particular, that the school system does not prepare our students well, and that they face enormous difficulties when they get to university, and a lot of them can't cope. And that's the high dropout rate, that is in addition to racism and all these other questions. So they can't cope, and it creates this problem. And that maybe we need an extra year, like in neighboring countries where they have A-levels, for those students who would like to go to university to prepare. And I had a discussion with the Minister of, first with Kada Asmal, when I was his deputy, but we left it because there was that difficult area of reconfiguration of higher education. So it didn't go far. But with the present minister, and we have not gone far either, that perhaps after matric, those students who would like to go to university should have an extra year of whatever we call it in order to prepare them for university. And then the others can branch off to other things. And see if that's viable. It's something that you could look at, because it's not, that part is not only UCT, but it is countrywide. The dropout rate is frightening. There are many who come here and they don't go to universities and they do not graduate. Maybe in your submission you may comment on to see. And we're hoping that with the current minister we might be able to take it further. But she's skeptical. She thinks that rather perhaps universities must be given what is it? What do you call it? Those students who are given an extra year or something. Bridging course or something. But that puts pressure on universities as opposed to this pressure being put elsewhere, where it can be addressed and so on. And we are destroying a lot of young. I've been saying that we are a country that destroys its young. And those people we bring to university and they don't pass and they drop out are destroyed in many ways. But we are way out of time now.
Can I just, sorry,
yes.
I have just two questions which will take a minute, half a second. Two, concerning racism. The students that have mental problems, are they mainly black students? What's your impression? Or are they everybody?
Predominantly black students.
Predominantly. Do you know, does anybody know of any white student who has that sort of problem? No. And the lecturers who go out of their way to help out, are they black lecturers or white lecturers too?
I think it would be good to specify that what we know about are the students who take their lives and succeed in taking their lives.
Yeah.
And that information is available. You just
And those are all black?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just need to go put in what's that? Visitors in remembrance of a student, and the details are there.
Okay. And then the lecturers who help, are they black or white as well?
Predominantly black as well.
Predominantly black. People help in different ways.
No, but the kind of help you were talking about.
I've not encountered a single white
Okay.
colleague at a hospital ward when a student had asked for help. I've seen them bring food during the day.
But I think it's more for lack of information than so we can only talk about the things that we see. So that doesn't mean that there are no students, white students with mental health problems. I'm sure that they are there. It's just that.
But if the in remembrance ones are all black, it tells a story, doesn't it?
It tells a story.
Okay.
Just one last thing. I think it's important that we echo this point that Shose and Elelwani are making. We can provide the solutions, but I think it's wholly unfair to expect us to be the only ones who carry the burden of providing the solutions to problems we do not create. And so in order to come to a point of accountability, the burden of providing those solutions cannot be only provided by the BAC. BAC has been doing that for years. And of course, they have to come from somewhere else as well, which is why the submission is tabled here. Is that we have been providing those solutions. We can specify what those solutions have been. We can specify what the resistance has been. But also we think that it has to be, we have to find a point of accountability where the people who are creating those problems are also then expected to provide the solutions.
The people who are creating the problems are less capable of providing the solutions, in my view.
But then they must.
And that's
that incapacity.
But I take the point. We will ask.
That incapacity cannot be laid on our shoulders and at our feet.
I'm saying you cannot get out of it either. I agree with the point that we will ask everybody to provide solutions, and I agree it shouldn't be left only to you. Right? To that extent, I agree with you completely. That everyone must be asked, what do you say are the problems? And what do you say are the ways forward? Now, even those white people who come and say, well, the black people are just feeling they're just not right and they're off their heads or something, we'll have to ask them, well, now, in terms of how you see the problem, where's the solution? We'll have to try and put all this together. Unfortunately, the burden is on us, ultimately, and we're just asking you to help us.
Okay, we will be seeing other constituencies.
Yeah.
And we'll be asking them. Thank you very much for coming.